Living with daily persistent pain is exhausting. Even the thought of overcoming our pain seems insurmountable. Understand why pain is complex and learn actionable steps that will improve your quality of life. Now let's join Amber Kylick on A Path from Pain.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to be honest here. I was having a challenging time with this episode. Why, you ask? Okay, maybe you didn't ask. You may have already turned this off. But if you're still here, thank you. Each week I sit down and write the script for this podcast, and I'm inspired by so many different people, different aspects of what I'm learning, and many past experiences that I've had with my own path from pain and helping others as well. Can I ask you a favor? Please hit the subscribe or follow button on whichever platform you're listening in on, and keep listening. Comment below on what aspect of this topic really resonated with you. This week, I wanted to talk about inflammation, but then I started writing and veered off into osteoarthritis, then started doing some research and ended up in a completely different area, mainly because I'd gone down so many tangents that I felt like I should be assessed for having ADHD. And with so many people that I've talked to in the last 6 months who are also considering that they may also have ADHD, it brought me to the topic of today's podcast, our ability to focus. I have this habit. I head to the library with my kids who are avid readers, thank goodness, and I'll typically head to the section where they put out popular new titles. I'll pick 2 to 4 of them and take them home. Usually I end up finding a good one and that gets me reading. Recently, I picked up Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. I loved it so much I went out and bought a copy. First, he is an amazing author that weaves incredibly connected stories into his research and links the initial idea into a bigger picture. But the main reason that I want to talk about this book and the idea of our stolen focus is that it can directly affect how we experience our pain levels and in turn give us ideas on how to manage our pain. So let's look at a small example of how we have lost our ability to focus in 3 parts. First is our lack of sleep. And I'll talk more about sleep in a future episode, but the basics for today are about our screen usage in the evening. We've evolved to have a second wind after sunset so that we can get things done before bed, whether it's setting up a camp for the night or just cleaning up the kitchen to get ready for the next day. This is a good thing. The downside is that when you start getting tired again in the evening, we seem to have developed a habit of putting things down and chilling out in front of a screen. TV, computer, tablet, or phone, whichever is your device of choice. The light from the screen restarts your alertness and reverses the natural signals of tiredness. Then, if you happen to be paying any attention to the time, you'll see it's getting late and you'll turn off the device. The downside is that with that exposure to light, you're now likely in another energy surge and you have a hard time falling asleep. Or let's say you're not paying attention to the time at all and you end up watching 5 episodes of Bridgerton and it's now 3 a.m. What's happening? Your natural circadian rhythm is set to the rise and fall of the sun, so that late evening light is what triggers your melatonin production and eventual ability to fall asleep. By using a screen, this light from the device now reverses that melatonin production because your body now thinks it's daytime. This flip-flopping and messing up your circadian rhythm cycles can completely mess up your sleep. Now, we need sleep. If we're sleep deprived, you'll find the usual things. It affects your mental clarity, your mood, and you feel sleepy all day. You need that caffeine fix. But sleep deprivation also has an effect on weight gain, immune function, and pain levels. We've also thought that our pain wakes us up and that our pain is what leads us to sleep deprivation. But there have been studies done that now show lack of sleep was likely the first step that led to our increased pain levels. So here's your first actionable tool. It's in 2 parts. 1, reduce your screen time before bed. Ideally, turning off all screens 2 hours before bed, start dimming the lights. But reality is where we live. So let's reduce our screen time a little bit at a time. Start with not ever looking at a screen in bed. If you've already managed that part, then have all the screens turned off 1 hour before bed. Continue building on this habit. The second part is more of a plan for the night after a poor sleep. A night of bad sleep is bound to happen, and they say it's likely 2 to 3 nights a week that it happens. So when you wake up in the morning and you're going about your day, when the pain sneaks in, allow yourself to acknowledge that you had a poor night's sleep and that it's likely the reason for your higher pain level. Just that one step can help calm some cranky pain levels. So let's bring this back to that lack of focus before I get off track again. Another area that suffered with our lack of focus has been the area of reading. It is too easy to scroll and get the gist of ideas. Remember Cole's Notes? Social media is like the Cole's Notes of Cole's Notes, making the skill of actually stopping to read a book and be immersed in the world of a story a lost skill. Did you know that we develop 2 different ways of reading based on reading from a book versus reading from a screen? After 2 decades of research, Anne Mangan, a professor of literacy at the University of Stavanger in Norway, has discovered that when you read a book, you learn to read in a linear way, and this allows you to sustain your focus on one thing for a longer period of time. If you're reading from a screen, this focus disappears, and you start to read by jumping from one spot to another and skipping over different parts. Imagine the difference between getting cozy on the couch and diving into an amazing story versus speed reading through a book and getting the basic idea of the story. If we look at this learning style with elementary school-aged kids who are learning to read, the difference of learning from either a physical book or from a screen can equal 2/3 of a year's worth of reading comprehension. Setting up kids to learn to read on a screen for a couple of years, and this is a huge deficit. If we take this into consideration in the pain management field and translate it into how we pay attention to our bodies and sensations, we could find something here. If you've worked with me, you've likely experienced a connection of your breath in relation to acknowledging the sensations in your body. And you know that this practice is one of the key elements of managing your pain levels. This connection of paying attention and calmly acknowledging the sensation without pushing it away and reacting instantly is a big step toward rebuilding your life with pain. Now, if you've tried this technique and you've had a hard time focusing, we might be on to something here. If you approach this work the same way you read a book versus reading a screen, it's likely that you would not have the same effect on calming your nervous system. You might notice you're more jumpy. You might be more reactive. I would love to put together a study with regards to this and reconnecting reading physical books and pain management. If this is an idea that interests you and maybe you get back into reading actual books and you find that you're calmer and able to manage your pain better, please let me know. Now, here's an interesting side note in terms of reading. Let's take this lack of focus on reading and put it into another context. The ability to read other people's emotions and the possibility of developing the skill of empathy. A professor of psychology at York University, Raymond Marr, has studied this and found that the more fiction people have read over the years, the better they are at reading people's emotions. So if we think about our loss of focus, what does this say about how we can relate to each other now and in the future? Let's keep reading books. Yay for your local library. Moving on. Quick question. What was the first thing that you thought of when I first mentioned our loss of focus and attention? Could it have been social media and the doom scrolling that happens? Did you know the guy who invented the infinite scroll severely regrets that invention? And if you're not too familiar with infinite scroll, head over to Facebook, start scrolling. Do you notice you ever hit the bottom of a page? Do you remember back in the day, we used to reach the bottom of a page and you'd have to hit next? You'd have to physically make that connection of hitting next. But now it just keeps going forever. Anyways, Asa Raskin first thought he'd develop something amazing. But after a few years, he did some looking into the effects of the ability to infinite scroll and found that a conservative estimate was that it keeps you scrolling at least 50% longer. And that, I'm sure even you've noticed, is a very conservative number. Social media is designed to keep you on their platform. The longer you're there, the more ads they can show you. The more ads, the more money they bring in. With that, the system is designed to show you posts and ads that it has decided will maintain your attention and keep you scrolling. I'm sure you've noticed that one day you're talking about some random house things like a blender, and the next thing you know, you're seeing blender videos, ads, and recipes everywhere. The money that drives this hook into our focus is huge. It is a global force, literally. If we were to turn social media around into a healthy social media and our ability to focus, there would be a significant impact on the global economy, not one that many would be ready for or even open to. So, with that being said, let's look at our phone usage. Check your phone. If you go into your digital well-being setting in your phone, it will give you a rundown of how much time you spend on your phone each week and likely in whichever app. Side note here. I went in to open up my phone to check the hours I spent on my social media last week so I could put it into this podcast. It took me 10 minutes to get out. I literally got caught up in checking email and text messages. Talk about lost focus. So, last week, I spent just under 3 hours on social media, which I have to say is actually really good for me. I do know it used to be much longer, easily 8 to 10 hours a week. This is what prompted me to change. I felt like time was passing me by, with so many more productive things that I could be doing with that extra 8 hours a week. So, look at your social media. Do you feel like time is slipping away? Let me offer you 3 tips for finding a little more control. First is the easiest one. Go into your settings and set up grayscale mode. I use this from 7 p.m. to 8 a.m. It turns my screen into black and white. I can also set it up so that it turns off any notifications. So if someone phones me or there's a text message, I can look at it the next day. But back to that grayscale mode. The lack of dynamic color makes your phone less stimulating and way less addictive. No cost, super easy, and it's also been shown to be the most effective way to lower your phone usage. Second tip. I downloaded an app called Minimalist Phone by Digital Detox. Yeah, there's a cost to it. It's about $35 for lifetime access, but it's lowered my phone usage greatly by not only making my screen a basic color with just the list of apps, no icons, but it also asks me right away when I open an app like Instagram how much time I want to spend on the app. Then it times me and lets me know when that time is up. It's a good reminder of how much time flies by, and it makes me more accountable for the infinite scrolling. Third is not an easy one, but it is no cost, and it's 2 parts and can be pretty effective if you remember to do it. One study found that the average person touches their phone over 1,000 times a day. So each time you pick up your phone, get into the habit of first asking yourself why you just picked up your phone. If you don't have a solid reason, like checking a message or finding a piece of information, maybe just put it down. Then, the second part, ask yourself what you were avoiding. That can be pretty powerful and gives you a chance to actually think. Now, I could talk about this more, and the book Stolen Focus is what I consider a must-read for any adult. So now, what to do? You've now listened to a few concepts about what is stealing our focus. I'm guessing at least one has popped out and made you think a little about your connection to getting distracted. But this is the hard part. It sounds easy for me to say, get more sleep, read a book, reduce your screen time. But habits are habits. Some are harder to break than others. And when there's a highly intelligent algorithm working to keep you on your screen, it takes some solid conscious effort. In working with chronic pain, these are all things we need to try and address, because being distracted in and of itself is a way to manage pain levels. But there are healthy ways to manage, and hopefully now you can see there are unhealthy ways to manage. So, as a closing note, that mention of ADHD at the beginning of this podcast, this is also talked about in the book Stolen Focus. I want you to look at your life right now. Do you feel a level of constant underlying stress? The reason I ask is a professor of child psychology in Minneapolis, Alan Struve, believed that ADHD was an inborn biological problem and started his research in 1973 to figure this out. He was sure that he would find that it was an inborn biological issue, because that's what they thought back then. But it turns out that there is a different story. And in following over 200 families for that last 40 years, he found it has to do more so with growing up in a stressful environment. If you didn't have the support from your parents to help you learn to calm yourself, it was more likely that you would develop certain behaviors that would then lead to an ADHD diagnosis. So just step back and look at this big picture here. If we're now living more rapid-paced, stressed-out lives, not only what does that do to our kids, but what does that do to us? If our focus is lost, things stress us out more than ever. Searching for a solution on social media or Google is likely our go-to. Then the obsession about what we read and the disconnection from not only ourselves but from others, this takes us down a huge rabbit hole. But don't panic. Let's make a couple of changes over the next few weeks. Comment below. Let me know what change you're working on. Honestly, I could talk about this for days as well. Complex pain, it's not black and white. Everyone who experiences daily pain is unique and deserves to be heard so that you can learn to build your path from pain. Interested in learning more? Check out some of my articles, my YouTube channel, Critical Movement YYC, or even join me for the free 5-day Path from Pain program. Or message me. Let me know how I can help you build your path from pain. Either way, hit that subscribe button. Follow this podcast. If you like this episode, let me know why in the comments below. If you learned something that's helped you, consider supporting this podcast to help me keep producing content that can help others. And share this podcast. Please, word of mouth is so much stronger than social media. And I look forward to chatting with you in another episode.